Thompson, and I'm here with Sharon Brown and Annetta Collier, and we're talking about recovery from codependent behaviors, and we'd like to invite you to join us. We're on lesson 8 in the series, and we're going to talk tonight about intimacy in relationships. We talked about boundaries on our last show, and boundaries are so important to all of us, whether we're codependent or not. It's very important to know something about boundaries, to have good boundaries, good healthy boundaries. By the time we've reached this stage in learning about recovering from codependency, we are ready to know what in the world is intimacy in relationships. Why have I gone all my life and not been close to the people I love, whether it was your parents, your children, your siblings? What have I missed? What is intimacy in relationships? In her book, Escape from Intimacy by Ann Wilson Schaaf, she makes some suggestions here. She says the first prerequisite for intimacy is to be intimate with oneself. What on earth does that mean? That is such a mystery to people who have been codependent all their life and have lived with their heads in the sand. We must learn to be intimate with ourselves. Well, first of all, as long as we are looking outside ourselves for intimacy, we will never have it, and we will never be able to share it. In order to be intimate with another person, we have to know who we are, what we feel. Back to lesson 2, we've got to be in touch with our feelings. We've got to know what we think, what our values are, what is important to us, because if we don't know these things about ourselves, we can never share them with another person. And that makes so much sense. How on earth can we be close to someone if we're not even close to ourselves? And there again, we're expecting someone else to make up to us what we're not doing for ourselves. Codependents and other addicts cannot be intimate because they have used their addictions to turn off their internal information systems. And we've talked about that a lot in denial. If we stay in denial so much, we eventually turn off our internal information systems. Many of the things we do in codependent behavior prevents us from knowing what we feel, from feeling anything, and from having closeness with people. And that's the very thing we're striving for from the very beginning. All the stuff that we were doing all that time was to be close to people. Now we are ready to be close to people. So when we turn off our internal information systems, we don't have available to ourselves the information about what we feel and think and who we really are. And so we can't share that with another. We don't have the answers to these things. Noticing is one of the most important skills of intimacy. And what do we mean by that? In order for people to know who they are, they must notice when they're tired. How many codependents do we know that are workaholics? They don't even know when they get tired and when it's time to go home. They don't even know when their body says enough, when their mind shuts down. They keep going and keep going. They have not noticed what their needs are, and yet they expect another person to fill those needs. They must notice when they're hungry. How many codependents and non-codependents do we know who have eating disorders? Overweight, anorexia, bulimia, all the other eating disorders, because they're not taking care of themselves, they're not noticing, listening to their body at what it needs. They must notice when they like something or do not like something. They've got to get in touch with their feelings. Then they can share that with another person. They can tell that other person what they're feeling. That's the first step to closeness or intimacy with others. We must be able to notice when we're hurt, angry, afraid, lonely, needy, happy, or at ease. And back in the years when we stifled all of our feelings, we weren't noticing any of these, and all these feelings were stuffed inside of us. So many people are unaware of themselves. unaware of what they feel and think and know, that there is no way they could ever express themselves to someone else. And we wonder how a person can go through a lifetime feeling that way. The only way they can be like that is to continue focusing on other people, to deny that all this is happening in their own lives and to themselves. An interesting thing about intimacy or closeness with our loved ones is it can never be forced because it's a process. It's a happening. It happens gradually as time goes on. You can't seek out a person and say, I'm going to be close to that person, I'm going to be intimate with them. Intimacy and feelings. When a person feels their feelings, then they must learn what to do with them and how to express them. And we learned that in the second session. Intimacy is often subtly avoided, even while people say, all I want is to really be close to someone. And yet, they're actually avoiding it by talking about feelings, but not feeling them as they're being discussed.
Oh, so you're saying that a codependent want to be close to someone, but actually they're turning away from them?
The things that they're doing is preventing the closeness. And talking about feelings, but not feeling them, that's a real good statement to think about, because back in the lesson on feelings, when we've got to really examine that, exactly what it means and how do I do it and how do I learn this, just talking about your feelings is not enough. Might be a good step, or the first step, but you need to actually feel your feelings. Now, if you've got the opportunity to be close to someone and you really care about them and you talk about your feelings but you don't really feel them, you have fallen back into the behavior of acting a certain way to get something from someone. You act like you're feeling your feelings. You try to make that person think you're feeling your feelings so they will be close with you. And that is
Are they protecting themselves, the person that do that? Think they're protecting themselves.
Some of it is
from
protection,
hurt
because to
just don't
get
know.
close to someone, you have to be vulnerable and you have to let your defenses down and take the risk of being hurt or of it not working.
And is that
No
what
guarantee.
a codependent want to avoid getting hurt?
Protect the wall of protection.
And now some people are very expert at talking about feelings. They're just not very good at doing it. And it is hard at first. It's very difficult to do that, but it can be learned. These people are not harmonious within themselves about what is going on inside and what is expressed outside. And so when you talk about your feelings but you don't feel them, what's going on inside is totally different from what you're telling someone is going on. And you can see that sabotages intimacy. There's no way another person can get close to you when there's all that conflict going on. And so to be intimate with ourselves, we must have this kind of harmony. And so let's go back to lesson 2. Let's learn how to feel our feelings, and then we can jump ahead here to intimacy and share those feelings with someone we love. Once there's a certain amount of knowledge, information, awareness, and presence with the self, then there's a possibility of sharing the self with another. And it's like detachment. We don't have to do it perfect. And we don't have to be there completely because it's a lifelong process. But once there's a certain amount of it, enough knowledge, enough information about yourself, enough detachment from all these other people you've been attached to, you can share it with another. And you can finally experience intimacy. This then is the potential of intimacy between two people. If, however, one is not in touch with oneself, it is never possible to share that process with another person or other people. And you can spend many, many years in a relationship and never truly share yourselves with one another. Now, we talked about closeness with ourselves, getting to know ourselves, intimacy with ourselves. Now let's move on to intimacy with others. Before you can have a close relationship with another person, there's 4 key behaviors that will interfere with intimacy. They fall under the heading of responsibility, the illusion of control, dishonesty, and self-centeredness. And the last two you think could possibly have nothing to do with codependence, and so why are we even talking about it? Well, let's find out. Doing any one of these four things is guaranteed to destroy intimacy and destroy relationships. By responsibility, we mean the relationship with the self is the basic building block of relationships. Both parties must have broken through their denial systems to some extent. They must have achieved some degree of honesty with themselves and become willing to take responsibility for themselves. And so if you have one person who's in total denial, you cannot be intimate with that person. Both people have to be at a certain level, but they don't have to be perfect, and they don't have to be in complete recovery. So by taking responsibility in general, we mean each person must be a person in his or own right. Otherwise, what's going to happen? You will merge and become one person, and that will destroy the intimacy.
Okay, so you're saying that they're like, instead of being two different people, they're one person?
They're codependent.
Okay.
That's right. Intimacy does not require one to be perfect. Intimacy provides a major area for growth and self-awareness on both parts. What we mean by the illusion of control is whenever we get into expectations, we're moving into our illusion of control. We need to be clear of what we want and then be willing to let it go. The person that you love and you're close with, it's okay to let them know, this is what I need from you, this is what I want, this is what I need. But if they can't fill that needs, let it go. If you demand it from them, you're back into the old codependent controlling again.
Trying to control and change.
This is the illusion of control. It's okay to have expectations in a relationship, but let them go. When we try to make things go the way we want them to, we are slipping into a control system. And that's back into denial and not facing reality, pretending that things can be a certain way and that we will be happy when that person does something we want them to do. And that, for example, believing that if we act a certain way, we can make our partner love us and want to stay in the relationship. Love doesn't work like that. It cannot be controlled. Love is a gift that someone gives to us and a gift that we give to them. Just the way they are and accepting them exactly like they are. And the beauty of it is in a healthy relationship, they will accept us just like we are. And the other thing that will destroy a relationship is dishonesty. Well, we are not dishonest people, so we're not going to do that. Let's find out what it means. Relationships are so important to codependence, and codependents can feel so alienated and isolated without them, especially when codependents don't even have themselves, that they often slip in their quest for the truth, meaning that they will do anything for the sake of the relationship. Well, dishonesty never benefits a relationship, regardless of the reason that we tell ourselves we're doing it. We will act out, we will act as if, we will try to be a certain way, try to do things to keep the relationship going. And that's dishonest. That's not open communication with one another. Dishonesty never benefits a relationship, regardless of the reason we tell ourselves that we're doing it. Always when we find ourselves in dishonest behavior to try to appease our partner or try to make things appear better than they are, we're living a lie, and the first person we're lying to is ourselves. Lying to ourselves is just as destructive to the relationship that we have or need to have with ourselves as it is to our relationships with others. And so if we're not healthy enough to get into a relationship yet, we'll find ourselves doing all these things. We can't help it. We haven't reached the level of being well yet to be in a relationship. And it will be very hard to avoid doing these things. But when we get to a certain level, then we can try relationships. If we're not careful, if we're still in codependency, we sacrifice for the relationship, which often means not doing the things that we need or want to do, even when they would have no effect on the relationship. We fall back into obsession. We obsess about the relationship. We have an unrealistic view of it. We start doing things to try to save it, to make it better than it is. And those things aren't even necessary. They're not even affecting the relationship. But we're acting out all these roles, running around in circles, obsessively trying to save something that may not even exist. When we find ourselves doing that in a relationship, we need to step back and get some peacefulness and get some centeredness, and then find out what the real problem in that relationship is, and then start working at it in a healthy way.
But is that what a codependent don't want to do? Face the problem?
Sure. If they're back in codependency, it's very hard to face reality. It's been a way of life with them for too long. And the third thing that will interfere with intimacy, self-centeredness. Well, when is a codependent self-centered? When they have given their whole lives to other people, they're willing to sacrifice themselves for a relationship, and now we're accusing them of being self-centered. Let's find out what they're doing. When we're self-centered, it is difficult for us to see our partner as separate from ourselves and that got the point immediately. That's codependency. And see, we found out after getting in recovery that codependency is a very self-centered state of mind, but we don't realize it. Self-centered people tend to interpret their partner's feelings or acts as being either for or against themselves. They tend to begin to feel like anything the partner does is done for them, or if it's something they don't particularly like, then it's done against them. And do you know what this does? This puts them at the center of the universe, seeing everything as defined in relation to them. That is codependency. And codependents have no earthly idea that that's how they are, and that they see everything that way. They get their feelings hurt so easy, and many times they get their feelings hurt. The other person did not intend to hurt their feelings. The other person was protecting their boundaries, but they assume that everything is said and done in relation to them. You can come out of that, you can get over that, and get healthy, but that will destroy relationships.
That's what you call self-centered.
Yes,
sometimes.
very
And with a
self-centered.
relationship between a man and a woman.
And see, when you're out of touch with your feelings, all that is kept inside, and you don't tell anybody you're feeling that way, and it just makes things worse, and it defeats the relationship. There's no way you can have a good, healthy relationship. Another way of being self-centered in a relationship is to assume that whatever the partner feels or thinks has been caused by me. An adult child of an alcoholic or a codependent, when they're a child, they learn very early when something goes wrong, it must have been my fault. Children of alcoholics in dysfunctional homes and addicts assume everything is their fault. That's a perfectly normal, innocent thing for a child to feel when they're growing up. But when you become an adult and you carry that over into adulthood, it's very dysfunctional. And when you carry it into a relationship, it will destroy it. When your partner comes in, they've had a bad day, they're in a bad mood, they may have had a very good reason for feeling that way, and your first thought is, what have I done wrong? That's self-centeredness. And when you realize it, it makes it easier to come out of that behavior. Because codependents do not want to be self-centered. So you see, we can see things we've been doing all of our lives that prevented closeness with people, and closeness and intimacy in relationships. And this can apply to our children, our adult children that we want to be close to, our parents that we may be having a difficult relationship with siblings, with friends. This applies across the board with wanting intimacy with people. There is no place for self-centeredness in healthy relationships. We must see the other person as separate and equal, and let them have their bad moods and let them have their bad days, and then they can let you have your bad moods and your bad times. And probably something that a codependent has never allowed themselves to do. And you see, it's easy to see why intimacy is so hard to acquire in relationships. It takes two reasonably healthy people. It takes two. You cannot be intimate with a person that does not want intimacy with you. And codependents will spend their life trying to acquire that, and it's impossible. Genuine intimacy usually grows out of a process of history. And love at first sight usually doesn't work, doesn't happen. Usually the healthiest relationships are those that have a history behind them where they may have been friends for a while, they may have grown up together, there's some kind of history, they may have worked together for a while. Some kind of history is very important in creating intimacy. True intimacy is a process that grows over time. It is a process of knowing and being known, and it requires openness and willingness from each person involved. And how can you be open with another person if you're way back there in lesson 2 and can't feel your feelings? Intimacy has no techniques in spite of the how-to books that tell us all we have to do is this and this and this and follow the manual. Intimacy cannot be orchestrated. It starts with ourselves, knowing ourselves and being present to the self. And it gives us every reason in the world to go back and work through all these steps and get healthy with ourselves. Intimacy is not static. It is always moving to a new level. It is an energy flow with no barriers. It cannot be controlled. It cannot be held onto. It cannot be produced at will. We notice intimacy. We do not produce it. I think we've learned a little bit about intimacy tonight, and let's go to Kevin's Corner and see what the kids are talking about intimacy. And thank you for joining us.
Hi, I'm Kevin. This is Kevin's Corner. These are my friends, Mario, Eric, and Perez. Our story today is going to be about friendship. Betsy?
Thank you, Kevin. Sometimes friendship is known as intimacy. Adults call it intimacy. Intimacy has to do with how close you can get to people, how well you want to get to know people, and how well you want them to get to know you. So let's hear our story about friendship. This is a story about a little boy named Jamie. Mother looked out the window and saw Jamie in the yard. "No," she heard him say to some other children. "You cannot play with these toys. They are mine." Later that morning, she heard Jamie shouting from outside, "No, you can't play in this yard. It's my yard." When she called Jamie in to eat lunch, she heard him telling a playmate, "This is my bike, and I don't share it with anybody." After lunch, Jamie went out to play. He found his playmates, but they didn't want to play with him. Jamie came in crying. "Mother," he said. Mother said, "Jamie, I think you need to know something about friendship. You must be a friend to have a friend. You cannot be selfish with your toys and then expect your playmates to like you. You cannot share your toys only when you want to. You must share them all the time so others will know that you will always be fair with them." "But Mommy," said Jamie, I almost always share with others. This morning I just didn't feel like sharing. Now I do. It's not always easy to share with others, said Mother. Sometimes you may want to be mean and selfish, but you must not let these feelings make you mean and selfish. At times like this, you may need to work extra hard to share. Other times it will be very easy to share. Oh, said Jamie, I didn't know that about friendship. One more thing about friendship, said Mother. Not only do you need to be a good friend, but you also want to choose friends very wisely. You don't want to be friends with just anyone. You want to be friends with people who share the same feelings as you do about how to treat others. Remember, you can be nice to everyone, but you do not have to be friends with everyone. What do you mean by that, Mommy? Asked Jamie. You do not want to treat anyone unkind, but you want to be friends only to those who show that they will make good friends. Remember, Jamie, when we read from the book of Proverbs in the Bible, to choose your friends very wisely. Proverbs also says that a friend loves at all times. To try to be friends with someone who could harm you would not be wise. Choose friends carefully, but first of all, be a good friend. The next day, Jamie told his playmates that he was sorry he was not a good friend the day before, but that he was going to be a better friend from now on. Let's have some questions about friendship.
Caress, why is it important to be nice always and not just when you feel like it?
So your friends can learn.
Oh, that's a good answer. Mario, why must you not try to be friends with everyone?
Because some people are not the kind of people you would want to be friends with.
Oh, that's a good answer. Okay, Kevin, should you be nice to these people?
You should be nice to everyone, but you do not have to be friends with everyone.
Very good. Those were good answers. Let me see your pictures. Oh, those are going to look nice. Thank you, Kevin.
Thanks for coming to Kevin's Corner. See you next time.